Imagine waking up one day and discovering that someone had stolen nearly $4 billion from your country, not through a bank robbery, not through a cyber attack, but through champagne parties, luxury yachts, and Hollywood movies. This is the story of Jho Low, a chubby party boy from Malaysia who became one of the most wanted men in the world. He didn't rob banks with guns. He didn't hack computers. He used something much more dangerous: charm, connections, and fake documents. He partied with Leonardo DiCaprio. He bought paintings by Monet and Van Gogh. He even helped produce The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie about financial fraud. The irony is almost funny. Almost. But behind the champagne and the celebrities, Jho Low was running one of the biggest financial frauds in human history. And when everything collapsed, it destroyed a government, sent people to prison, and left an entire nation asking one question: how did nobody see this coming? This is the unbelievable true story of the 1MDB scandal. Jho Low was born in 1981 in Penang, Malaysia. His real name was Low Taik Jho, but everyone called him Jho. His family was rich, but not super rich. They owned some businesses, they had money, but they weren't billionaires. Jho was not an athlete. He was not a genius. He was not particularly handsome, but he had one talent that would change his life. He knew how to make friends with powerful people. When he was a teenager, his parents sent him to an expensive boarding school in England called Harrow. This is the same school where Winston Churchill studied. At Harrow, Jho met the children of princes, oil tycoons, and politicians. He learned something important. If you want to be rich, you don't need to work hard. You just need to know the right people. After Harrow, Jho went to study at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. And this is where his real education began. Not in the classrooms, but in the nightclubs. He started throwing huge parties. He would rent entire clubs, buy hundreds of bottles of expensive champagne, and invite everyone who was anyone. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to be remembered. And most importantly, he wanted to be connected. At Penn, he became friends with Risa Aziz, the stepson of Najib Razak. And this name, Najib Razak, is the key to everything. Because in 2009, Najib became the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And Jho Low suddenly had access to the most powerful man in the country. In 2009, the Malaysian government created a new investment fund called 1MDB. The official name was One Malaysia Development Berhad. The idea was simple: use government money to invest in projects that would help Malaysia grow, build power plants, create jobs, develop the economy. It sounded good on paper, but there was one big problem. Jho Low was involved. Even though Jho had no official position in the government, he was everywhere. He was advising the Prime Minister. He was attending meetings with ministers. He was making deals with foreign banks. Nobody really knew who he was or what he did, but everyone assumed he must be important. And this is how the fraud began. Jho Low convinced the Malaysian government to borrow billions of dollars through 1MDB. He told them the money would be used for investments. He brought in fancy banks like Goldman Sachs to help raise the money. Everything looked legitimate. Between 2009 and 2015, 1MDB raised more than $6 billion by selling bonds. Bonds are basically loans. Investors give you money now, and you promise to pay them back later with interest. But here's the twist. Most of that money never went to Malaysia. It went into secret bank accounts controlled by Jho Low and his friends. They used fake documents, shell companies, and corrupt bankers to hide the money. And then they spent it on the most ridiculous things you can imagine. Jho Low bought a penthouse in New York for $30 million. He bought a mansion in Los Angeles for $39 million. He bought a private jet for $35 million. He bought a super yacht called Topaz for over $250 million. He spent $100 million on parties in Las Vegas and Saint-Tropez. In one single night, he spent millions on champagne. He would order dozens of bottles of the most expensive champagne in the world and spray them on the crowd like it was nothing. He also gave gifts to celebrities. He gave millions to Paris Hilton. He gave jewelry to models. He even gave Leonardo DiCaprio a Picasso painting and a Marlon Brando Oscar statue. And the craziest part? He used stolen money to produce The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie about a man who steals money. You cannot make this up. For a few years, everything seemed perfect. Jho Low was living like a king. The Prime Minister of Malaysia was getting kickbacks. The bankers at Goldman Sachs were getting huge commissions. Everyone was making money, so nobody asked questions. But in 2015, everything started to fall apart. A small news website in Malaysia called The Edge started investigating 1MDB. They found strange transactions. Money going in and out of accounts with no clear purpose. Millions of dollars disappearing into shell companies in the Seychelles, the British Virgin Islands, and Switzerland. Then, in July 2015, a British newspaper called the Wall Street Journal published a bombshell story. They reported that nearly $700 million from 1MDB had been deposited into the personal bank account of Prime Minister Najib Razak. The news exploded. People were furious. How could the Prime Minister have $700 million in his personal account? Where did the money come from? Najib denied everything. He said the money was a legal donation from a Saudi prince. But nobody believed him. At the same time, investigators in the United States, Switzerland, and Singapore started looking into 1MDB. They froze bank accounts. They seized assets. They started tracking the money. And everywhere they looked, they found Jho Low. The FBI discovered that Jho Low had used American banks to move the stolen money. This meant they could investigate him under U.S. law. They started building a case. In 2016, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit to seize over $1 billion in assets connected to 1MDB. They wanted the mansions, the yacht, the paintings, the jewelry, everything. The world was watching, and Jho Low was running. By 2016, Jho Low had disappeared. He stopped showing up at parties. He stopped posting on social media. Nobody knew where he was. Some people said he was in China. Others said he was in Dubai or Thailand. But wherever he was hiding. In Malaysia, the political situation was getting worse. People were protesting in the streets. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. And in 2018, they got their chance. In May 2018, Malaysia held a general election. For the first time in 60 years, the ruling party lost. Najib Razak was voted out of office, and just 2 months later, Najib was arrested. He was charged with 25 counts of corruption and money laundering. The trial was one of the biggest in Malaysian history. In 2020, he was found guilty and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But Jho Low was still free. In 2018, the U.S. government charged Jho Low with money laundering and conspiracy. Malaysia also issued an arrest warrant. Interpol put him on their red notice list, which means he is wanted internationally. But to this day, nobody knows exactly where he is. Some reports say he is living in China under protection. Others say he is moving between countries using fake passports. The Malaysian government has tried to negotiate with him. They want him to return some of the stolen money. But so far, Jho Low has only returned a small portion. The 1MDB scandal is one of the biggest financial frauds in history. Investigators believe that more than $4.5 billion were stolen from the Malaysian people. It destroyed the reputation of Goldman Sachs, one of the most famous banks in the world. Several Goldman Sachs bankers were arrested or fired. the bank had to pay nearly $3 billion in fines. It brought down a government. Najib Razak, once one of the most powerful men in Southeast Asia, is now in prison. And it showed the world how easy it is to steal billions when you have the right connections. Jho Low was not a mastermind. He was just a guy who knew how to manipulate people, how to fake documents, and how to exploit weaknesses in the global financial system. The saddest part is that the money he stole was supposed to help Malaysia. It was supposed to build power plants, create jobs, and improve lives. Instead, it bought yachts and champagne. Today, Jho Low is still out there somewhere. Maybe he is on a beach. Maybe he is in a luxury hotel. Maybe he is planning his next move. But one thing is certain, his story is not over yet. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Capital Sins for more stories about business failures, financial frauds, and corporate collapses. Hit the like button and leave a comment telling us what you think about the 1MDB scandal. Should Jho Low be caught? And what should happen to him if he is? See you in the next video.